He expected silence and polish. Instead, at 7 in the morning, he found a woman sitting on his breakfast room floor, a tin plate balanced on her knees, 2 thin slices of bread, a smear of jam. Her apron was askew, her hair loose. She looked up and, with practiced politeness, said, "Good morning, sir." Daniel Crawford had built rules into his life, schedules, securities, and certain distances. At 44, he measured success by margins, not moments. He could recite the metrics of every company he owned, forecast cash flow in his sleep, and win arguments with numbers. Still, watching someone eat quietly on the marble floor unsettled him in a way that spreadsheets never did. The quiet was obscene and intimate at the same time, a private economy exposed. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice came out softer than he'd intended. She blinked, then smiled as if she had rehearsed the courtesy 100 times. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to be here. I just—" "Who made the plate?" he asked, looking at the bread. "My son," she said simply. "Isaac. He's 5. He left it for me." The name landed in him like a pebble striking still water. He knew, from gala speeches and foundation reports, about need in the abstract, in committees and graphs. He had never seen the domestic calculus of sacrifice that governed someone's morning. The thought that a child had slipped a small plate across a table so his mother could eat without being watched felt like a violation of distance he hadn't authorized. "Where is he now?" he asked. "In the car with my sister. We're on our way to the adoption agency," she answered. "They said he'd have a better life there." Adoption agency. Better life. Stability. In his world, stability meant investment-grade bonds and diversification. He had never thought of stability as a child's school lunch or a warm blanket on a winter night. The sentence unmoored him the way a minor earthquake rearranges furniture. Nothing collapsed yet, but the room's sense of place was gone. "How long have you worked here?" he asked to steady himself. 3 years, she said. "We share a tiny flat. Sometimes there isn't enough. I try to keep him safe." Daniel followed her to the service quarters, small rooms above the stables where the staff lived. The corridor smelled faintly of detergent and fried onions. A child's drawing was taped to a tiny fridge. A mattress lay in the corner, blankets folded with care. Isaac ran forward, superhero t-shirt and mismatched socks, hair still sleeping unevenly. "This is Mr. Crawford," she said. Isaac squinted up at him. "Like the Crawford on the news?" Daniel knelt. "Hello, Isaac," he said. The boy handed him a sticky action figure. Daniel accepted it like a token of truce. The plastic stuck faintly to his fingers. For a man who owned factories, accepting a cheap toy felt both absurd and essential. They sat in the cramped living room. She spoke with a bluntness that had been weathered into pragmatism. Rent was behind. Sometimes she skipped meals so Isaac could eat. A neighbor gave what leftovers she could. Raises at the household rarely reached the ones who needed them most. Fees and middlemen siphoned away nominal goodwill. Asking for help was dangerous. It could mean being labeled a troublemaker and losing work. "Why didn't you tell someone?" Daniel asked, more to himself than to her. "They tell us to be grateful," she said. "They say there are worse off. I didn't want pity." He remembered the staged empathy of charity dinners where children smiled between platters and photographers. He remembered feeling proud of supporting causes, numbers on an annual report, different forms of help, different realities. He found his own memory drifting. He was 6 once, staying with a relative during a summer that had too little food. He remembered the humiliation of a schoolyard where his stomach growled and a teacher handed him a sandwich with a quick, apologetic smile. The memory was a crack in the armor he'd cultivated. He had long since repaired himself with spreadsheets and success, but the crack remained sensitive. "Would you trust me to help your family?" he asked without thinking. She looked up, startled. "Why would I?" "Because I can," he said. "Because you shouldn't eat on floors to hide your hunger." There was wariness in her eyes. She had seen patrons come and go, promises made with cameras waiting, help that was performative and brief. "You are Mr. Crawford. People like you have many faces." He nodded, understanding the caution. "I don't want publicity. I want to help quietly." He left a note with HR, salary review, immediate rent assistance, childcare fund, and an instruction for the household manager to include more flexible scheduling. He did it differently from his usual decisions. There were no board memos, no investor briefing. It was a private redeployment of resources. He could feel, even as he scribbled, the small outrage some would feel if they knew. But he also felt a new, simple clarity. Over the following weeks he acted quietly and, at times, awkwardly. He arranged direct payments for back rent, a grocery subscription for the flat, and a scholarship fund for Isaac's school. He asked HR to review wages across the service staff and quietly implemented increases. He did not leak the changes to the press. He refused the applause. The shifts were small but concrete. A uniform purchased, a reading tutor hired, the neighbor who once left leftovers now coordinating a modest community pantry. He also began to visit in a way that made him uncomfortable, without a schedule, without prepared remarks. He sat on the worn couch and built a cheap model plane with Isaac, keeping his hands clumsy around glue and plastic. The boy concentrated with a seriousness that humbled him. Isaac's mother watched, sometimes smiling, sometimes with the worn look of someone who always calculates risk. One afternoon, as Isaac practiced a monologue for school, the woman told him about the husband who had left. She wrapped the story in economy. He left without warning, his wages stopped, they fell behind on rent, and creditors threatened. "I couldn't find work at first," she said. "I took whatever I could. I learned to hide my hunger." Daniel listened without offering solutions first. He felt small for having assumed his money could fix everything. Money could fix many things, yes, but it could not resurrect trust or erase the day-to-day weight of shame. It required delicate, sustained attention. There were complications. A supervisor raised eyebrows at the preferential scheduling and whispered that morale might suffer. A member of the board questioned why a CEO would interfere with household payroll without governance approvals. Daniel faced a private meeting with his HR director, where he defended the changes as a moral calculus that also aligned with long-term staff retention. He used phrases like employee welfare and operational stability because business language made the action palatable. He asked for processes that would elevate wages across the board, sensible employment contracts, and mechanisms for childcare that did not force parents to choose work over sustenance. Little victories mattered. Isaac stopped needing the tutor after a few months. His reading improved from halting to confident. He took part in school plays, spelling bees, and later science fairs. The mother's sleep that had once been fragmented by worry became more regular. She gained confidence to organize other staff, to petition the household manager for better break times and more transparent schedules. The neighbors, seeing the change, organized to support elders and children in the block. One evening, after a modest dinner at the flat, Isaac hugged Daniel and said plainly, "You're my hero." There was no performance to it, no camera present. The simplicity of the sentence landed and stayed. Daniel laughed and hugged back. The label neither wholly deserved nor entirely false. It meant something to be noticed, to be chosen, to be present. There were other consequences. At a board meeting, an investor questioned the funds. Daniel told, quietly, about a sandwich he once received as a child. The anecdote softened a few. Some supported scaling the apprenticeships. On a sunny Sunday, the street near the staff quarters held a small picnic the Maid had organized. Daniel brought sandwiches and sat on a folding chair among people who once felt peripheral to his world. A neighbor, an old woman who had once shared a pot of stew, told him with a grin that Isaac had taken apart the community radio and put it back together better than before. They laughed, offered slices of cake, and for a while the social grain that had been frayed by distance was mended by human routine. One morning, years after the tin plate, the woman paused in the breakfast room and said, "Daniel, sometimes I still think about that day. I used to be so afraid of being seen." He reached for the top of her hand reflexively. "You were brave," he said. "Maybe," she replied. "Or maybe I was just hungry." He smiled. "Maybe both." As years passed, Isaac grew into a young man with a steady gait and a curiosity about how things fit together. He took apart and rebuilt radios and then moved on to robotics in high school. The mother, now head of household services, oversaw multiple homes in the area. She no longer worried that a single missed meal would upend everything. Daniel watched the changes from both within and without. He expanded into new markets and still negotiated a hard line where needed. But his lens had shifted. He began to weigh acquisitions not only for return on investment, but for their impact on communities where his businesses employed people. He started a modest program that offered apprenticeships for employees' children. The initiatives were practical, administratively clean, and quietly personal. There were moments of awkwardness. His public persona as a resolute, sometimes ruthless executive didn't always mesh with a man who attended a child's graduation or helped a mother shop for a winter coat. Some journalists noticed the contradiction and made bland columns about the philanthropic tycoon. He rarely corrected them. The turning point came when Isaac applied to university to study engineering. Daniel received an informal invitation to the ceremony. He decided to go, not as a sponsor or a public figure, but as a friend. The graduation was small, sunlit, and honest. Isaac, now taller, his face lined faintly with the seriousness of a teenager, found Daniel in the crowd and hugged him. "Thanks for the action figure," he said with a grin. Daniel thought of the morning years ago when he'd frozen at the sight of a woman eating from a tin plate. He had not frozen from judgment, but from recognition. The way she had said, "He left it for me," had cracked something in him, a memory of childhood hunger, the sting of shame, the fragile courage small acts demand. Back at the house, walking across the marble toward the breakfast room, he paused at a patch of sunlight. He remembered how little it had taken to begin changing a life. A plate left by a small boy, a signature on a note, a quiet meeting with HR. The simplicity of it was deceptive. It required attention, persistence, and a willingness to be inconvenienced. He kept Isaac's action figure on his desk, dust on its shoulders, next to a stack of reports. It was a small, stubborn memento that reminded him that the most meaningful calculations aren't found on balance sheets. Outside the fountain splashed as if nothing had changed. Inside, the ongoing work of care continued, unglamorous and essential, and for the first time he felt comfortable in the space between being wealthy and being humane.